صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. We're going to start off tonight's program with the recitation of Holy Quran, for which I would like to call upon Brother Ahsan to come up and recite some verses from the Holy Quran. Let us welcome him with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى إن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى أرأيت الذي ينهى عبدا إذا صلى أرأيت إن كان على الهدى أو أمر بالتقوى أرأيت إن كذب وتولى ألم يعلم بأن الله يرى كلا لئن لم ينته لنسفعا بالناصية ناسية كاذبة خاطئة فليدع ناديه سندع الزبانية كلا لا تطعه واسجد واقترب صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات.
Thank you for that beautiful recitation. Next, I would like to call upon Sister Fatima Raza to come up and recite poetry. Let us welcome her with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
There's a quote from a Palestinian Shaheed. He says, "If you cannot be Husseini by seeking the path of martyrdom, then at least be Zainabi, on the path of propagation, by carrying the message and advocating. This is the least we can do to defend our land, our sacred sites, and our right to freedom, honor, and dignity." Salawat. One cannot fathom the scene of what her blessed eyes had seen. From Muhammad to Ali to Fatima to Hassan to Abbas to Hussein. From goodbyes to burnt tents to empty cradles to chains. One cannot fathom what she saw on those plains. Yet what strikes me even more, what awakens me to my core, are her words to such a sight. Her resistance, her might, and how with God's remembrance she illuminated those nights. For when the narrator tells of Zainab lamenting over Hussein, he says, "I, by God, will never forget her grief and pain. Yet I saw her hands in supplication rise to the skies, Ya Rab, accept this sacrifice." And when she stood in the court of that tyrant, her words were fearless and valiant. Never did she victimize herself in the face of the oppressor. She prayed only for God's pleasure. She thanked her Lord for the honor of her loved ones granted the status of martyrs. She tells Yazid, "For violating the sanctity of the messenger's kin, you have only torn at your own skin." Her words tell of how falsehood will be disgraced and that haqq will never be erased. She says to that tyrant, strive your utmost and best. Strive your utmost and best, yet you will never extinguish our message. The enemies still fear her brave lines. The enemies still fear her brave lines, for her words expose their very crimes. It's no surprise that they come for her shrine. Yet, as she says, as much as falsehood wishes, haq will never be extinguished. I see such words echoing today as the martyrs ran towards her way, exclaiming, Lan yaqrabu sharaf al-haram. Never will you near this shrine as long as we are alive. I see her and every mother of a martyr as they beam satisfied, holding up the photos of their sons with pride. For I see Zainab's message living on in those who strive in truth's propagation. I see her and those who rise in front of the enemy, sharing a martyr's word and legacy. When I see the tyrants and their failed attempts, when I see the martyrs and their blessed effects, I remember Zainab's blessed words. Strive your utmost, but by God, you will never erase our remembrance or extinguish our message. Salawat.
Thank you so much for that recitation. First and foremost, we would like to thank Sheikh Jaffer for accepting our invitation for Muharram and coming to this center. And we hope that inshallah we will have him again in the future if he wills. And inshallah, I would like to thank all of you who have supported in any and every single way that you have, with your money, with your whatever volunteering, with your efforts, with your time, whatever you have done for the sake of Abu Abdullah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you, inshallah, success in this world and the hereafter. And just like yesterday, we have some of the books that Sheikh wrote and translated. We have them available on the table. So inshallah, after the program, they will be available as well. And inshallah, please do not forget to donate. Inshallah, tonight will be the last lecture. So please extend your hands in donating generously, and reach out into your pockets, and inshallah, uh, please help us in continuing these efforts throughout the entire year. And last but not least, we would like to once again thank Sheikh. And throughout the year, if you would like to know what programs are happening, please join our WhatsApp group, and inshallah, we'll be informed about the program that will be coming up, inshallah, for Arba'in and so on, and throughout the year. Last but not least, I would like to request Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin, Sheikh Jaffer, to come up and address his majlis. Let us welcome him with a loud, three loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
No, last night was 12. No? Last night was 12. Tonight it's 13. Inshallah. For the love of the Holy Prophet Muhammad al Mustafa, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Please open your Qur'ans to chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah. Verses 119, 120, and 121. Chapter 9, Surah At-Tawbah, verses 119, 120, and 121. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to serve Abu Abdullah al-Husayn alayhi salam with all of you, and also to take this opportunity to thank you all for your participation in this Ayyam program. If there has been any shortcomings from me, then I apologize and seek your forgiveness. And if you have felt that there has been some benefit in the series, then I ask you, inshallah, to find some way, in your own way, to try to apply some of the discussions that we have had, even if it's one that you feel has resonated with you, then please find one area that you feel you can take forward in your own life, be it individually or as a family unit or as a community. And also, if there is opportunity, inshallah, I look forward to being able to serving the community again at some point in the future. For the love of our Master Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. And if we can have a louder salawat to ask Allah to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi, ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj al-sharif. Allahumma salli. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: ولا ينفقون نفقة صغيرة ولا كبيرة ولا يقطعون واديا إلا كتب لهم ليجزيهم الله أحسن ما كانوا يعملون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل. Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. عظم الله جورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. If we want to be able to take something practically away from our series of discussions, where would you begin and how would you be able to measure whether there has been some success from this particular Muharram that you and I have been participating in? Amongst the premises of our discussion has been that this Muharram in particular must not and should not be like any other Muharram that we have been participating in before. Time and time again in the opening nights, we reiterated how much the world has changed in front of our eyes, especially in the last 9 months and since October the 7th. But beyond that, if we want Muharram to be a success, then Muharram has to be in line with the goals of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam himself. The fact that he set out for reform, for change within his ummah, the primary way I can measure whether there is success in this Muharram or any other, be it for myself as a person individually, or for my family unit, or for my community, or for my nation, or all the way to the level of humanity. The only way I can measure whether there has been any success is if there has been some reform in my life. 13 nights we have been gathering together so far. By the time Eid al-Zahra comes and we take off the black and once again adorn ourselves with color, we will have had some 2.5 months of majalis. And not just one lecture. Many of us will listen to many of our favorite lecturers throughout the entirety of the months of Muharram and Safar. And we will be gathering knowledge, wisdom, discussion points, debate, ideas for literally days of our lives. Not hours, days and weeks of our life cumulatively will have been spent gathering all of those various different ayat, ahadith, ideas, insightful reflections, analyses of what's happening throughout the scope of life and the ummah. The only way I can truly measure whether all of that time has yielded some benefit for me is if there is some reform in something that I do. If my salah is better, if my relationship with my parents is better, my akhlaq and my patience is better, my hijab is better, how much I am reading of the Quran is better, whether I start a good habit like Salat al-Layl is there, whether I break a particular haram that I am habitual in doing, just one of these would be evidence that the Muharram that you are participating in has been a success. Subhanallah, the bar is actually quite low if you think about it. It's not hugely high, is it? But you and I actually know that even to change one habit in our lives is actually a huge thing. So don't think it is a low bar. It is actually quite a good accomplishment if one of us, if all of us can have some self-development over the coming weeks and months based off the Ashra of Muharram. But let's take it a little bit further. Our discussions have less been about the individual and more about the collective, more about the ideas that we have as a community, as a group, for the way in which we want to make a positive impact in this world. Time and time again we asked, how can the Muslim community be a force for good within the society? How can Al-Khoi Center continue its progress and development measurably? This is the key word. At the individual level, I gave the example. If you can just break one bad habit, if you can just start one good habit and keep it, if we can improve our sincerity in some way, or the way in which we speak to our parents, then we have sufficed ourselves to say we can measure the improvement between where I was 1 month ago and where I am today over the course. Fine. What would be a way in which you and I could measure progress within our own communities, to say that after Muharram and Safar, our communities are tangibly in a better place than what they were 2 months ago, 1 month ago, or 12 months ago, for example. And this is actually what I want to be able to focus on for the conclusion of our discussion. That raises that question that if we want to be able to start to think about the application of some of the discussions that we've been having, where would we go about? The first thing we want to do is just very briefly sort of mention 3 or 4 of the archetypal points that we said throughout the series, just to stimulate that memory coming back. We mentioned, for example, that the Quran is not random, that the Sunnah of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam is not random. There were priorities that the tartib al-nuzuli, that the order of revelation responded to, and there were challenges at the time of each Imam of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalam, and they understood what those challenges were, and then they created the response. We mentioned the hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. أعرف الناس بالزمان لم يتعجب من أحداثه. The one who knows best the times in which he lives in will never be surprised or defeated by the events therein. So, as one major point of taking away, we mentioned that a person, a community, needs to know well what is happening in its surroundings. We need to know what is happening in Queens. We need to know what is happening in Greater New York. We need to know what is happening in the trends in the United States of America, what the challenges are, what the needs of the youth are, what the needs of our sisters are, what the needs of our elders are, what the need of the wider society is, and then we're in a position to be able to do something. Another overarching headline that we mentioned, we gave an example. We said that a statistic tells us that 23% of the entirety of the US is worried about where its next meal is going to come from. That's almost a quarter of 330 million people. They worry that they have to skip a meal because they can't afford it. In credit card debt, people have $1 trillion of credit card debt. Just credit card debt, huh? No mortgages, not student loans, just credit card debt. We gave the example that the sunnah of the Prophet was that it set up institutions to be able to help the people overcome these problems. And it went to war for it. It relentlessly intervened in the criminal behaviors of exploitation and abuses of people's wealth until people themselves were willing to change what was happening on the ground. The Prophet set up institutions of Qard al-Hasana. Do you remember I mentioned that incredible hadith where the Prophet temporarily raised the bar of thawab and temporarily made haram the potential of even complaining about someone who came to you for a loan? Do you remember that narration? It's so incredible. The Prophet said, he who politely asks for a loan, you will have no accounting on the day of Jannah. You cross the Sirat quicker than a bolt of lightning. This was emphasis on you going and getting a loan. 0% interest. On the other side was the harma of even complaining. Man shaka ala akhihi. The one who even complains about his brother asking for a loan, his Muslim brother asking for a loan, Allah would make haram for him Jannah. So strange. How can these two things be equal? The Prophet understood what was happening and realized that two communities, to bring them together, the Ansar and the Muhajirin, he needed to encourage this behavior. And so he increased the thawab and he made the haram on the other side. And then people began to change their behaviors in light of the narration. When the situation on the ground changed, the Prophet normalized the same action. Or similarly, we gave another hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. La yuba'u dain bid-dain. That the loan cannot be sold by another loan. We mentioned that in the system of mortgage lending, it is the norm of securitization. All of your mortgages can immediately be sold to another broker, to another bank, and this is to protect themselves, not protect you. The Prophet outlawed this 1400 years ago. If Muslims took the sunnah of the Prophet seriously, those who were in the banking system, those who were legislators, they could push and protect the whole of society in this area. Just an example. Understand what is happening in your world and see how you can participate to help. Okay. For you and I, we have to start moving beyond the idea that we are working as individuals, but we have to see ourselves as a collective force. There are 2,000, 3,000 people in this community. Imagine what your collective power is, your collective wealth, the collective opportunity of time that you have, the collective expertise that you have. If we want to transition from being individuals to a community of force, the first thing we have to do is think about what we as individuals have to offer to the collective, to the mass, and migrate that movement from my individual skill set into a collective skill set. There's an incredible hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. And I want you, as we read this hadith, to put yourself into the hadith. Okay? When I say put yourself into it, I want you to imagine your individuality in the hadith that is being mentioned by Imam alayhi salam. Your personal situation. Imam alayhi salam says the following. في قوله تعالى نحن قسمنا بينهم معيشتهم. Imam Ali alayhi salam mentioned about the ayah of the Quran. It is we, Allah, who has dispensed amongst the people their livelihoods. Allah dispenses amongst each and every one of us our rizq, our livelihood, everything that we have in our life, our education, our income, our property, all of it Allah divides amongst us. There's no disagreement on that. Allah gives to you what He gives to you, He gives to me what He gives to me. Fine. Now comes the interesting thing. Allah إذ خالف بحكمته بين همم وإرادتهم وسائر حالاتهم. Pay close attention to this. Allah, in His wisdom, has diversified the energies, the wills, and the conditions of people. Allah has diversified your capacity, your areas of interest, your areas of expertise amongst yourselves. Had Allah, Imam continues in the hadith, had Allah made man's employment to one another as a means of their livelihood, if every one of us was forced to build for himself, make his own furniture, produce everything for them own selves, if we were all doing these things individually, the world's conditions would not be bearable. Allah has diversified the aspirations of mankind so that across a community, every type of need is represented. You understand the hadith? Let me put it into my own words, away from the literal statement of the hadith. Allah has diversified your aspirations. He has made you all unique and individual. Allah has made it that you all have different paths in your life, different areas of interest, different areas of expertise. Because otherwise, had we all been the same in this world would have been an unbearable world to live in. If we all had exactly the same area of interest, the world could not continue. It could not improve. There could be no evolution in the world. If all of us were taxi drivers, if all of us were surgeons, if all of us, God forbid, were Maulanas, this world would be a very unbearable place to live in. Allah diversifies the aspirations. Now, what this means is, from a theological perspective, is that your individuality, your area of interest and expertise is not random, but that Allah's hand has been there all along. Isn't that an incredible thought? Why do you have an interest in what you have an interest in? Do you think it was random? Does God work in random in any other part of the universe? What does he say in the Quran? Not a leaf falls, not a drop of rain falls, but that it's in his knowledge and it's already written in Kitabin Mubin. So to imagine for a second that your life's journey and path, the reason why you were born here in this time, the reason why you went to the school that you went to, or that you're interested in the things that you are interested in, and studied the vocation and the subjects that you did, for you to think that it's purely random goes against this hadith and what we understand of Allah's role that He plays in the entirety of our lives. هُوَ يُصَوِّرَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْحَامِ مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah is the one who formed you in the wombs of your mothers as He pleased. The Quran says. None of this is random. Your qualities and skill sets are purposeful, not purposeless. Now, if it is purposeful and you are not born in a random place in the world, nor born at a random time in the world, nor are your expertise or your areas of skill sets random, what is the next conclusion? The reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had His hand in that is so that you give that back in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah has been the one who guided you in your life to this path, what does He expect once He's guided you there? To give back. Zakatul ilm tanshuruhu. Imam alayhi salam says, the tax that you pay on ilm is that you have to spread that knowledge again. You gain, you give away. You gain, you give away. This is the system of life that God has created for us. But at a community level, this is where it gets more interesting. Because if Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has diversified your aspirations, and He makes sure that life can continue and be prosperous because the whole of need is spread amongst you, it means that sitting in this room, sitting in this building, is the cumulative knowledge that is required to be able to push the community forward to its next level. The same way Allah diversifies the aspirations in all other areas, in science, in engineering, in technology, in order to keep the tatawurat, the evolution of mankind going, at the communal level, at your local level, Allah has also given the skill sets, the capacity, the time, the energy, the expertise, the wealth to be able to push the community in accordance with where He wants it to go. If it is not going there, it is not His fault. The shortcoming becomes on us, because He has given us those internal skill sets. If you're in a community in Moscow, the needs are different, but Allah will give that community the needs in that generation for the needs in Moscow. If you are in Baghdad, the needs of the community are different, but in that Husseiniya, in that community, Allah has diversified the skills, the aspirations enough that in that community it can continue to prosper and go forward. It is not possible then to say that in our community here in Al-Khou'i or in New York, that the community doesn't have the required skills and capacity to be able to push it to where it needs to go next and beyond. It requires that level of introspection and then thinking about where I want to be within the community, what I want to do with that skill set that I have. And not thinking that I'm just here randomly, to go and get my degree from X university and then get married and move on and have kids, and that's what life is. No, that's not what life is. What Allah has given to you, it is purposeful, very, very specific to you, and He expects you and me to give back through it. Now, here comes the challenge. I can't speak of this community because I'm a guest. It's my first time I am visiting here. But I can mention to you about other communities that is a specific challenge that mosques face. And you can decide whether you feel this is a challenge that you find elsewhere, whether you find it here or elsewhere, wherever. In many communities, the skill set that is found within the community is phenomenal. There are people who are incredible leaders, visionaries, people who want to work, who actually cry out to be able to work. But for many reasons, they don't find space within the four walls of the community, within the Hussein. There's one sister in the UK, and whenever I see her, I always tell her that she is like a hero for me. She's an example for me. She's just such an outstanding individual, but so passionate and with wisdom and ideas, but the community doesn't want to give her the space. The community isn't ready. Well, it's not even that it's not ready. They don't want to be ready to be able to give her space, to be able to lead the community forward. What happened? She had to leave serving the Husseiniya and go to an external organization that would accept her in order for her to be able to contribute to the Muslim society. Now, when that happens once, it is a loss. When it happens twice, it is a tragedy. But when it happens consistently, that the youth who are passionate, who have skill sets, who have leadership, who have time, who have energy, who have courage, who want to be involved, when they are pushed out of the Husseiniya and not given the reins, not given the space, what happens is that the best and the brightest of our community leaves the four walls of the Husseiniya and puts their efforts elsewhere, or worse still, doesn't put their efforts elsewhere. The outcome of that is that within the four walls of the mosque, there is a brain drain that occurs. That collective power, that collective intellect, that vision, that insight that different members of the community could be harnessing is lost within the four walls, and maybe that energy goes elsewhere, and maybe it doesn't go anywhere. But the mosque loses out. A second problem is, and I mean this in the most humble sense, that if you have the best of your community not involved in the community, they're attending, they'll sit and they'll come for the majlis, but if they're not participating in the progress of the community, if they're shunted to the side because they're young, because they're women, because they're from a different culture, because they're not an elite, their surname isn't a popular surname, if they're shunted to the side, not only is there a brain drain, but instead those people who are incapable of leading the community are left to lead the community. You understand? You have two major problems. If I just put it to you in this way, if you shunt Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam to the edge of the community, with respect, you are left with Uthman bin Affan. You are left with Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. You're not left with the creme de la creme. You are left with what is left after it. Can you see? In our own communities, it is exactly the same way. If you do not have space for the people that are interested, capable, God conscious, with wisdom and vision, then they leave and other people come and fill that vacuum. And it's not necessarily going to be the very best people for the community. Like I said, I don't know if this is happening here. All I can say is in my experiences of many other communities, this happens. And every time I go to a community, you always have a discussion amongst the youth to say, We want to be able to do X, we are trying to do Y, but the elders don't let us. And so what happens? They end up leaving the community and going elsewhere. There is a drain from the best of the community. These are institutional problems that we very quickly should have resolved by now. We are a third generation immigrant community. This shouldn't be still on our agenda to have to mention. But in light of that, once we give reins to those people that are passionate and in leadership, a community to be able to measurably progress itself needs to put in tools of measurement. You can't just say, as an individual, my salah is better. That's good for you as an individual. But at the collective level, you need to have a little bit more of a measurement, because how can you measure whether someone's salah is better? You individually know your salah is better after Muharram, but you can't tell that for 2,000 people, can you? So if a community wants to progress internally, the first practical thing that it needs to do is to make sure it retains the creme de la creme of its community, the passionate of its community, those who want to serve the community, those who have got ideas for the community. You don't always have to agree with them, but at least give people the space to be party to the community. And God forbid they end up coming on the Day of Judgment and say, I wanted to serve, but my ideas were never good enough. My ideas were always shunted to the side. This is one. Two, we have to make sure that a community has measurable targets. Here I'm going to be very, very specific with you in example, and I leave it again for you to be able to take away and start thinking about in your own ways, inshallah. The majority of communities I've had the blessing of visiting, in many, many of those cases, the leadership is often still micromanaging what is happening in the mosques. I know I'm coming from a Khoja background, so I'm speaking about presidents. In the Khoja community, the alim is not the head of the community. The alim is a poor employee. Yeah. In the Khoja community, the president, who normally comes from an elite family, he is the head of the community. Do you know how many presidents I see? May Allah bless them. They micromanage even down to the colors on the posters that go out. And I'm not exaggerating. If you're a president and you're still doing the posters and micromanaging the colors of the posters, there is something wrong. You should be the visionary of the community, planning the next 5 and 10 and 20 and 50 years of the community's progress. It is unfathomable that a CEO of a business is micromanaging everything on the floor on a day-to-day basis. But at the same time, it is unfathomable that a business doesn't have measurable targets month on month, year on year. We call them KPIs, key performance indicators. A mosque or a Husseiniya must too have key performance indicators to see whether the key elements of what it is trying to achieve is happening or not. The difference is, in a spiritual setting, the KPIs are to do with spirituality, akhlaq, and akhirah, more so than what business KPIs may be. Is that a fair point? If your KPI is, I want to see how many people come to the Muharram Majlis. Last year we had 3,000 people. This year our KPI is 3,500 people. Okay, let's say you achieve it. And what? Is that a measurement of the progress of the community? Is simply having more numbers a measure of the progress of a community? No. So in a Shia, Ithna Ashariya community, what would be your KPIs in line with our deen that would prove month on month or year on year that we can measurably see whether the community is progressing or regressing? What would they be? I'll give you one or two, but I'm going to ask for your ideas. Okay, so be prepared. I might pick on you. The most important one might be, what percentage of our community is praying salah 5 times a day? Would that be a fair starting point? As-salat umud ad-deen. Salah is the foundation of the entirety of the religion. In qubilat ma siwa. If it is accepted, everything else is accepted. If it is rejected, everything else is rejected. Is that a starting point? So imagine leadership amongst yourselves. People who are, but what did I say? Everybody has diversified aspirations. Amongst you will be people who are interested in data collection, data analysis. Yes or no? For sure, there will be someone amongst you who is interested in this, capable of doing this. It takes one person to get the data of the community and to ask how many of us are actually praying salah 5 times a day, and to see, as an example, it is only 20%. It is then the leadership's responsibility to increase that amount. That after 1 year, after 2 years, it is now 40% of the community reciting their salah 5 times a day. And so the programs, the education, the emphasis, the reminders of the community go into the KPI of salah 5 times a day. Can you see? It's not difficult, but that would be an evidence that between last year and this year, we've actually improved the community. Not random, we invite some lecturer, he comes, he says what he wants to talk about, she comes, she talks about what she wants to communicate. Where is the progress? Where is the measurable, discernible progress? How are we still living like we did 40 years ago when we first came to this country? In every other walk of life, we have people who are CEOs working for the top 500 companies in the country. But when it comes to the Husseiniya, we're still acting like we are in 1980. Doesn't make sense. I'll give you another measurable KPI that you and I can think of. Simple one. Maybe you can help me expand on this one a little bit. How many people are there in your community? Give me a number. How many? Is that right? Is there 10,000 people with Al-Khoi? What's the number? Okay, 3,000. What percentage of that is in poverty? Give me a number. Be realistic. 3,000 people in the community that this community immediately serves, Shia community. What percentage is in poverty, or worse still, absolute poverty? 25 to 30%. Is that a fair number? Is that a fair number? Yeah, that's 1,000 Shia in poverty. Meaning what? Out of a job, don't know where the next meal is going to come from, don't know if they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Imagine a very simple KPI that said over 5 years, we are going to eliminate poverty in our community. It's not difficult. Believe me, there are enough of you who are entrepreneurial, enough of you who are, mashallah, given the rizq to be able to do so, who have enough opportunities to open the door, to be able to help pay off certain debts, to be able to help the youth with whatever they need to be able to get into better schools, to find better jobs, over 5 years, to lift them out of poverty. Imagine in 5 years' time if we could say no one in our community is poor any longer. Or we reduce the number from 30% of the community to 10%. Just imagine what you could do with that extra wealth and capacity within your community. It's not difficult. So throw some back at me. What would be a KPI that you would like to see for 1 to 5 years? I told you I was going to pick on someone. Oh, you can't use mine. The Islamic loan system. I like that. I don't know many of the sisters' names, so I know Sister Sayyida, so I'm asking her name. I'm asking her, what KPI would you want to see in the community? Say again? The amount of goals and jobs, roles and jobs in the community. What would that mean? What's that KPI? Okay, you're actually onto something if I understand what you're saying. But yes, please give us one. Brilliant. We want to increase the number of teachers that we have in the madrasa by 20%. So we have those who are graduating out. We want to train them into being teachers and so on and so forth. It's a brilliant, it's a KPI. Community driven outreach programs. We want to have 5 outreach programs in the year. I'm just going to make up one. You want 20 new reverts to the center after 1 year. It's a KPI. But it means you have to put on the programs in the right spaces, in the right places to be able to achieve that. Right? You might have in this community, understand your strengths. There are many within the community who, for example, are very engaged in Sunni Shia dialogue. I remember one of the brothers in one of the nights here, he said to me, I'm constantly online on Reddit. And every time I start a conversation on Reddit about Khilafah and Imamat, they block me. Okay? So what is that telling you, brother? It's great, you're passionate, but imagine if you set up a center for intra-faith dialogue inside Al-Khou'i. Imagine a space where Sunni and Shia could actually dialogue healthily, systematically, and over a period of months. Imagine what you might see coming out of it. Yeah. Excellent. A KPI to measure how many people have depression or, God forbid, a particular addiction that needs to be overcome. These are excellent. Can you see? The community needs to measurably, tangibly grow. I'm going to give you one last one and then we conclude with the ayat that we wanted to talk about. The sister mentioned about roles within the community. I'm picking up on that. I don't know if this is what she was intending. Yesterday, we mentioned about the importance of our community responding to the biggest global crises that we have. What is that? What was it? Global warming, environmental catastrophe. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had one person, or however many, we had a person whose job it was that they are nominated to be a person who oversees the betterment of Al-Khou'i's carbon footprint from the mosque. You have one person, a team of 3, a team of 5. Their sole job is to assess the footprint and ways in which we can reduce the carbon footprint and put in policies that ensures that over a year's time we remove our footprint from here to here. Is it a difficult thing to create? Is it difficult? No. I'm going to go one step further and abuse my position that I have. I nominate Brother Jari. Brother Jari has studied environmental sciences and continues to also work with his sister who is studying sustainability. So this is a person in your community. What did I say? Allah diversifies the aspirations. The reason why you are who you are is not purposeless, it is purposeful. full. It is there so that you give back to your community. It cannot be that we have the gravest problem in mankind's history. We are talking about extinction level problems by 2100, and we have someone in the community who is an expert in that field who can create policies to help us, and we just go on as if nothing changes after 10 or 12 days of reform-based majalis in the name of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahu salamuhu alayhi. You have people in your community that are experts, passionate, capable. Put them into the roles that they need to be in within this community. It's not my job to tell you what to do, but I'm giving you an example. So I say, I humbly nominate one person as that person to be overseeing and helping with our environmental footprint. Can you see how quick you can change the community within the space of minutes? It doesn't take long. We just need to start thinking about what our objectives are for the community. Please open your Qur'ans to chapter number 9. Which verses? Who can remind me? Ahsantum. I love it when you do that. It makes my heart go. Verse 119. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. O you who believe, be careful of your duty to Allah and be with the truthful ones. Verse 120. It is unbefitting of the people of Medina and those around them who are the dwellers of the desert to remain behind the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When the Prophet calls them, it is unbefitting of them to be behind the Prophet, meaning not alongside him, not supportive of what the Prophet needs. Nor should they desire anything for their own selves in preference to that which the Messenger wants. Look at this next part of the verse. Look at how hard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demanded the early mu'mineen to work for the sake of the ummah. This is because there afflicts them not thirst, nor fatigue, nor hunger in Allah's way, nor do they tread the path which enrages the unbelievers. The people of Medina, some of them, the people of the outskirts of Medina, they didn't do this. They didn't put in blood, sweat and tears to make the community go forward. Allah is complaining about them on the Day of Judgment. Allah is complaining about them in the Holy Quran. There afflicts them not thirst or fatigue or hunger in the way of Allah. They're not willing to give up anything, to struggle in any way. Nor do they tread the path that enrages the unbelievers. Nor do they attain anything from the enemy, but a good work is written down for them. When they take something back from the enemy and use it for Islam, it is recorded for them in what they do. Inna Allah la yudhi'u ajra al-muhsinin. Allah does not waste the reward of the good doers. Do you know how far we are supposed to travel in order to be able to support the community, to move it forward? Verse 121. وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَ نَفَقَةً صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً. Nor do they spend anything, whether it be a tiny amount or a great amount, nor do they traverse a valley, but it is written down for them in their credit, that Allah may reward them the very best of what they have done. Every effort that we put in, large or small, Allah rewards us with the best of what we have done. The best niyyah that you had, the best outcome that you had, Allah will give you the best reward for everything you do, irrespective of whether it came to fruition or didn't. Just your intention, just your giving a little bit of effort, Allah will reward you with the very best of ways. In the tafsir of this by Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrisi, may Allah preserve him, he explains the following about moving the community forward in the tafsir of this ayah of Surah At-Tawbah. He says the following: Al-mujtama' al-mustaqir al-raqid laysa mujtami'an risaliyan wala musliman. A progressing community is not necessarily a community of the faithful, of the believers. لأن الإسلام الحقيقي هو الاهتمام بشؤون الآخرين. It doesn't necessarily have to be a believing community that is progressing in the world, but the Muslim community, its duty is to be concerned with the progress of all others. Not just yourself. What happens in the four walls of the mosque? You are concerned with the outcomes of what happens with people outside you. والدفاع عن حقوق المستضعفين إلى درجة الجهاد من أجلهم. والمجتمع الإسلامي لا يجمد في حدود الإقليمية ضيقة. And the Islamic community is not only thinking about its local region or the area that it sits in. وَلَا يَقُولُ بِنَاءُ الْوَطَنِ أَوَّلًا. And the Muslim community doesn't say, we only take care of our community first. ثُمَّ انطلاق لإصلاح الآخرين. Then we take care of other communities. Then we work on what's happening outside of the four walls of the mosque. لأنه لا وطن للفضيلة والخير ولا حدود للعدالة والرفاه. Because there's no such thing as one preferred community over another. It is our job to fix our internal structures as well as go out and help others outside the community. وهكذا كان الرسول صلى الله عليه وآله نذيرا للعالمين. This is how the Prophet was a warner to the entirety of the worlds. And then regarding verse 121, Ayatollah al-Mudarrisi says the following: فالجزاء دقيق وأفضل من العمل. The jaza, the reward that you get for the things that you do, is far greater than the act that you do. Allah will give you something better than the thing that you give in the way of Islam. ولذلك لا تنظر إلى عملك نظرة مطلقة وعامة. Don't look at the small act that you do. Don't look at the individual acts that you do. Don't look at the whole of the things that you do. بل أنظر إلى كل جزء من عملك. Look into the parts of everything that you do. Make sure every part of your role is doing well. Every part of your community is progressing. وَاعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ لِكُلِّ جُزْءٍ جَزَاءً. Know that for every single part, there is reward for it. There's reward for improving what happens in the madrasa, and on the pulpit, and in the youth, and in every different part of the community. Everything that you do will bring jaza to it. Then he gives an example. He says there is the hadith that says that with every good thing that you do, even a tasbih, Allah places a tree for you inside your Jannah. Just one thing, as small as just saying the word Subhanallah, immediately Allah puts a tree in your Jannah for you. So do you not realize the smallest of acts that you do brings you the biggest of reward that you can't fathom? When it comes to you progressing your community, look at all the different parts and work on those parts to make them better and improve. Here, we're given to you some suggestions. One, that whatever skill set you are given, try to bring it back to serve the community. The talent that you have, no matter what age you are, the talent that you have is not yours. It is Allah's who gave it to you. Number one. Number two, the community may want to set KPIs to actually measure the difference that is being made over a period of time. And number three, when you have people of expertise, put them into the roles within the community so that the community may progress. And every part of that community that progresses, there is jaza for you, inshaAllah. In days like this, right now, 1400 years ago, the granddaughters of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are being forced into parade from city to city. According to some narrations, the captives were taken on the longest possible route in order for them to be paraded between the most number of towns and cities, in order to try to humiliate them as much as possible in the eyes of the people. Can you imagine that in every town and in every city that they stop, that the army of Yazid announces them as being the enemies of God, whom the Caliph has taken revenge over, and then he invites the people of the towns to participate in that vengeance as well. If I mention to you one narration, it suffices for you to understand what took place upon those routes when the Sabaya, when the captives were taken from city to city, town to town, village to village. This narration comes from our fourth Imam As-Sajjad alayhi salam. He himself says that when we reached Damascus, 6 things happened to us. The first thing that happened to us was that we were made to wait outside the great gate of the door of Damascus whilst Yazid gathered the people together from across the towns to be able to witness our humiliation, to celebrate our humiliation. That they made the entirety of Damascus decorated as if it was some sort of celebration and party that we had been dragged there as captives. The second thing, that when we entered into the city of Damascus, they came towards us and the army started announcing to people that this is the family that defeated your ancestors at Khaybar and Khandak. Come and take your revenge. And people from all the different faiths and sects gathered around us, laughing at us, mocking us, abusing us. Can you imagine a 4-year-old girl like Bibi Sakina being shouted at, having her arms pulled one side to the other as each of the people from Damascus tries their best to harm her and mock her and abuse her? Imam As-Sajjad alayhi salam continues in this hadith. He says, the next thing that befell us, that as we were walking inside Bazar al-Sham, as we were walking through those streets, there was a lady who was standing on one of the houses above the shops. She took a piece of wood, she set it alight and she threw it at my head. It hit me on the head and my turban began to burn. I want you to ask yourself what you know about Sajjad. Sajjad's arms are bounded down. They are tied. He is shackled with heavy weights. If his turban and forehead is burning with fire, how does he put it out when his hands are bound? All I can imagine is Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam running towards him and helping him. How many times did Zainab alayhi salam have to save Imam As-Sajjad? And then Imam As-Sajjad alayhi salam mentions in this narration a heartbreaking part of the Masa'ib. He says that we were taken to an area of where they used to sell the slaves off, and they tried to sell us off as slaves. Can you imagine someone trying to bid on Sayyida Zainab and Sayyida Kulthum? Can you imagine someone trying to bid on Fatima and Bibi Sakina? Then Imam As-Sajjad says, Allah saved us from this tribulation. But maybe out of all of the tribulations that he narrates in this hadith,
there is one that is the most heartbreaking, and that is the one that happened to Bibi Sakina alayhi salam. He said that as we were walking through Bazar al-Sham, one person took a cup of boiling water and splashed it towards us. This is why you hear in the Maqtal that when Sayyidina Ruqayya was being buried, that Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam and Bibi Zainab could not take off the clothes because it had stuck to her body. This is what befell your beloved Ahlul Bayt in the dungeons of Kufa and Sham. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلمون ظلم أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please raise your hands and join me in dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, to allow us to be alongside him at all times in our life and in our death. If we're to pass away from this world before his coming, Ya Allah, raise us from our graves so that we can partake in the victories of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. Ya Allah, let this series be of benefit to all of us, inshallah, in some way, that individually and collectively we find some growth in accordance with the challenges that we find in our world, in our nation, in our community. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the tawfiq to be able to better ourselves in the name of the reform that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is seeking from us. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein.
کیا رہا ہے منہ میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی کیا رہا ہے منہ میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی صرف رونے کو محمد کی نواسی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی چھینتا تھا شیم چادر اور زینب بار بار چھینتا تھا شیم چادر اور زینب بار بار اپنی چادر کے محافظ کو بلاتی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی اے مسلمانوں تمہاری غیرتیں کیا ہو گئی اے مسلمانوں تمہاری غیرتیں کیا ہو گئی تم تماشائی تھے زینب منہ چھپاتی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی مادر اصغر نہ بیٹی سائے میں اصغر کے بعد مادر اصغر نہ بیٹی سائے میں اصغر کے بعد سائے میں آئی تو زندہ لاش باقی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے एक उदासी रह गई, क्या रहा खैमों में शके, एक उदासी रह गई। हर तमाचे पर सकीना मुंह पे रखकर नन्हे हाथ, हर तमाचे पर सकीना मुंह पे रखकर नन्हे हाथ, नीले रुखसारों के गाजी को दिखाती रह गई, क्या रहा खैमों में शके, एक उदासी रह गई, क्या रहा खैमों में शके, एक उदासी रह गई। सिर्फ रोने को मोहम्मद की नवासी रह गई, क्या रहा खैमों में शके, एक उदासी रह गई।
زيارات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا خيرة من خلق الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا سيد الوصيين، السلام عليك يا إمام المتقين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله حسين بن علي بشهيد كربلاء، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك وعلى أخيك أبي الفضل عباس وعلى أختك الحوراء زينب وعلى 9 المعصومين بذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الباقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي التقي وعلي بن محمد النقي والحسن بن علي العسكري والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، السلام عليكم أهل البيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.